Module 5. Defendants and Criminal Evidence. Defendants and Criminal Evidence. Balancing Justice and Rights. The interplay between defendants and evidence forms the cornerstone of fair trials and just outcomes in the criminal justice system. Defendants accused of committing crimes are guaranteed the presumption of innocence until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Evidence, encompassing material, physical, testimonial, and digital forms, serves as the tool by which the prosecution and defense establish their narratives. The relationship between the two is pivotal, as evidence must be meticulously presented, authenticated, and evaluated within the bounds of the law. The admissibility of evidence in court is governed by rules designed to ensure fairness and reliability. For instance, evidence obtained unlawfully, such as through illegal searches or coercion, is generally inadmissible due to the exclusionary rule. This principle safeguards the defendant's constitutional rights against unreasonable searches and self-incrimination. Similarly, evidence must be relevant, material, and free from undue prejudice to be considered by the court. Defendants can challenge the evidence presented against them, often through cross-examining witnesses, forensic analysis, and independent investigations. This right ensures the evidence is scrutinized and contextualized, allowing the court to discern its credibility and weight. The defense may also present counter-evidence to establish an alibi, question the integrity of the prosecution's evidence, or provide alternative interpretations of the facts. Redefining conditions in criminal evidence. A contextual approach. In criminal evidence, the term conditions traditionally refers to the surrounding circumstances that affect evidence's reliability, relevance, and admissibility in legal proceedings. These conditions include the physical environment where evidence is found, the chain of custody ensuring its integrity, and the procedural guidelines governing its collection. Such factors are critical to safeguarding the fairness of the judicial process and ensuring that evidence supports justice rather than undermines it. Another way to define conditions in the realm of criminal evidence shifts the focus from procedural elements to the broader social, psychological, and cultural factors influencing evidence. This perspective recognizes that evidence does not exist in isolation. It is embedded in a dynamic network of human behaviors, motivations, and societal norms. For instance, witness testimony can be shaped by the individual's psychological state or the cultural context in which the event occurred. Similarly, the presence of implicit biases or systemic inequalities in law enforcement practices can create conditions that affect the collection and interpretation of evidence. The role of illegally obtained evidence in legal proceedings. Evidence obtained in violation of a defendant's constitutional rights is generally inadmissible in criminal trials due to the exclusionary rule, which aims to deter unlawful conduct by law enforcement and uphold constitutional protections. However, there are specific circumstances in which such evidence may still play a role in legal proceedings. One prominent exception occurs during grand jury proceedings. Since the primary purpose of a grand jury is to determine whether probable cause exists to indict a defendant, courts have allowed the use of evidence obtained unlawfully, reasoning that the exclusionary rule does not apply as strictly in this context. Another instance arises during the impeachment of a defendant's testimony. If a defendant testifies in their defense and provides statements that directly contradict evidence obtained unlawfully, such evidence may be used to challenge the defendant's credibility. The rationale behind this exception is to prevent perjury and ensure the integrity of the trial process, even if the evidence in question was initially obtained inappropriately. Additionally, courts sometimes apply the good faith exception, allowing evidence if law enforcement officials acted with a reasonable belief that they were following legal procedures. However, this exception is often debated and narrowly applied. The Fourth Amendment and its application in criminal justice. The Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution protects individuals against unreasonable searches and seizures, ensuring a balance between individual rights, and law enforcement responsibilities. This amendment is a cornerstone of privacy rights in criminal justice, guiding the conduct of police and other authorities in various activities. Its application is most apparent in situations involving the search of personal property, homes, vehicles, and electronic devices, as well as the seizure of evidence or individuals. Central to the Fourth Amendment is the requirement of probable cause and judicial oversight, which typically necessitate a warrant before searches or seizures can occur. Exceptions exist, such as difficult circumstances, consent, and situations where evidence is in plain view, but these are carefully scrutinized to prevent abuse. The amendment also applies to activities like surveillance, wiretapping, and digital data collection, all of which have expanded in scope with technological advancements. Establishing competence. The role of witness testimony in legal foundations. In legal proceedings, a witness's testimony is critical to pursuing justice. To ensure the validity and reliability of their contributions, witnesses must demonstrate competence, which is foundational to their ability to testify effectively. Competence encompasses a witness's capacity to observe, recall, and communicate facts relevant to the case. Establishing this foundation is essential to assure the court that the testimony is credible and meaningful. A witness must testify to their first-hand knowledge of the matter to lay a foundation for competence. This involves demonstrating that their observations or experiences are based on direct interaction with the events or circumstances examined. The witness must clearly articulate how they acquired knowledge through seeing, hearing, or perceiving the events. Their testimony must establish that their understanding is neither speculative nor based on hearsay, but rooted in their personal experience. Understanding hearsay. A legal perspective. Hearsay is a legal concept that refers to an out-of-court statement introduced in a court proceeding to prove the truth of the matter asserted. It is generally excluded as evidence due to concerns about reliability, as the original speaker is not present to be cross-examined. The exclusion of hearsay stems from the fundamental principle of fairness in legal proceedings, ensuring that evidence is credible and subject to scrutiny. This principle underscores the adversarial nature of legal systems, which prioritize direct, verifiable testimony. However, hearsay is not a simple, rigid rule. It comes with numerous exceptions. In situations where the circumstances of a statement indicate inherent reliability, such as a dying declaration or a statement against the speaker's interest, hearsay may be admissible. These exceptions aim to balance the need for reliable evidence with recognizing that some out-of-court statements have inherent trustworthiness. Navigating the complexity of double hearsay in legal proceedings. The principle of hearsay exclusion is a cornerstone of evidentiary law, designed to ensure that only reliable and direct evidence is presented in legal proceedings. Hearsay, defined as an out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, is generally inadmissible unless an exception applies. However, the complexity deepens when a hearsay statement contains another hearsay statement, a situation often referred to as double or hearsay within hearsay. In such cases, neither the outer nor inner statement is admissible unless each independently satisfies an exception to the hearsay rule. The rationale for this layered admissibility requirement is to safeguard against unreliable or unverified evidence influencing the court. Each level of hearsay introduces a potential for distortion, exaggeration, or outright fabrication. Consequently, the evidentiary rules demand that the outer and inner hearsay statements be scrutinized separately. They must independently qualify under recognized exceptions, such as statements made during the excitement of an event or admissions against interest. For example, suppose a witness testifies that they heard another person recount what a third party said. In that case, the court must evaluate the admissibility of the statement made by the intermediate person and the original speaker. The evidence cannot be admitted without independent guarantees of trustworthiness for both layers. This requirement underscores the legal system's commitment to fairness and the accurate administration of justice, ensuring that only substantiated and reliable evidence informs judicial decision-making. Understanding hearsay. The context of a testimonial statement. In legal proceedings, hearsay is defined as an out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. When a witness testifies, "I heard the defendant tell the victim he planned to get even with him for killing his brother," the classification of this statement as hearsay hinges entirely on its purpose in court. If the statement is introduced to prove that the defendant intended to get even with the victim, it would qualify as hearsay because the truth of the defendant's intent is central to the matter being asserted. The court would be asked to accept the statement as evidence of the defendant's state of mind, which relies on the credibility of the declarant, the defendant, rather than the witness's direct observations. However, suppose the statement is offered for another purpose, such as showing the effect on the listener or establishing that the statement was made regardless of its truth. In that case, it may not fall under the hearsay rule. The distinction is crucial because hearsay evidence is generally inadmissible unless it falls within a recognized exception. This rule ensures reliability in judicial proceedings as the original speaker is absent to be cross-examined about their intent, context, or truthfulness. Thus, the statement's admissibility depends entirely on its intended evidentiary role. Balancing evidence. Meeting the burdens of proof in criminal cases. In criminal cases, the burden of proof defines the obligations of both the prosecutor and the defendant, shaping the trajectory of justice. For a prosecutor, the burden is to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest standard in law. This standard reflects that letting the guilty go free is better than convicting the innocent. On the other hand, while presumed innocent, the defendant may be responsible for introducing reasonable doubt to challenge the prosecution's case or prove certain affirmative defenses by a preponderance of evidence or clear and convincing evidence. Balancing evidence between these parties is crucial in ensuring fairness and justice. The prosecutor must build a case that withstands meticulous scrutiny, presenting credible, relevant, and compelling evidence. This evidence must demonstrate every element of the alleged crime, leaving no room for reasonable doubt. However, the process also demands acknowledgement of the defense's right to dispute the prosecution's claims. The defendant can counter the narrative by highlighting inconsistencies, presenting alternative interpretations, or introducing exculpatory evidence.